My family skipped the biggest moment of my life. I stood on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange, the weight of a gavel in my hand and a $102 million valuation on the screen behind me. But the 4 VIP seats reserved for my parents and sister were empty. I thought they were stuck in traffic. I thought there was an emergency. Then I checked Instagram. My sister Candace had just posted a photo from a luxury spa in the Hamptons with my parents captioned, "Finally escaping the noise with the people who matter most." I swallowed the lump in my throat and rang the opening bell alone. But when Forbes published my net worth an hour later, my phone lit up. It was a text from my father. "Family dinner at 7. Important discussion." I showed up all right, but I did not bring the checkbook they were hoping for. I brought the deed to their house. My name is Maya, and at 34 years old, I had just become the CEO of one of the fastest-growing AI health tech companies in America. But as I stood there in the heart of Wall Street, surrounded by cheering investors and flashing cameras, I had never felt more like the invisible child. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you have ever been the black sheep who outgrew the flock, hit like and subscribe. This story is for you. The morning of the IPO was supposed to be the culmination of 5 years of sleepless nights. My company Dermascan had started in a freezing garage where I coded algorithms to detect skin cancer in melanin-rich skin, a demographic the medical industry often overlooked. I had eaten instant noodles for dinner more times than I could count. I had worn the same 3 suits to pitch meetings until the elbows wore thin. Today was the payoff. The ticker symbol DRMA was about to go live. The floor of the exchange was a chaotic sea of traders and media. The energy was electric, a physical hum that vibrated through the soles of my heels. My husband Isaiah stood to my left. He squeezed my hand, his palm warm and steady. He looked handsome in his navy suit, beaming with pride, holding my phone to capture the moment. But my eyes kept drifting to the right, to the small roped-off VIP section I had fought to secure. I had sent the limousine to my parents' house in Chicago at 5 in the morning to get them to the airport. I had bought first-class tickets 3 months ago when I told them the date my father Reginald had puffed out his chest. "We will be there, Maya. It is a big day for the family name." My mother had cried. My sister Candace had even promised to reschedule her nail appointment. Now at 8:58 in the morning, 2 minutes before the market opened, the velvet rope hung slack. The 4 gold chairs were empty. "Maybe the flight was delayed," I whispered to Isaiah, though I knew the flight had landed 2 hours ago. "Maybe the driver got lost." Isaiah looked at me, his eyes filled with a sadness he tried to hide. "Maya, look at your phone." I did not want to look, but I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket. My thumb hovered over the Instagram icon. My sister Candace was an aspiring influencer, which meant she documented every breath she took. If they were in traffic, she would be complaining about it on her story. I tapped the screen. The colorful ring around her profile picture indicated a new update posted 12 minutes ago. The image loaded. It was a selfie. Candace was wearing a plush white robe, holding a glass of cucumber water. In the background, out of focus but unmistakable, were my parents. My father was laughing at something, looking relaxed. My mother was getting a foot massage. The location tag read, "The Sanctuary Spa Hamptons." And then, the caption. The words that cut deeper than any rejection letter I had ever received from a venture capitalist. It read, "Finally escaping the city noise and stress. Quality time with the people who matter most." Family. First. Self-care. Blessed. The noise. My life's work, my historic moment, was just noise to them. They had not missed the flight. They had skipped it. They had cashed in the first-class tickets I bought them and used the credit to fly to the Hamptons instead. 1 minute to opening, the stage manager shouted, pointing a finger at me. I felt the blood drain from my face. the room started to spin. They chose a spa day over the defining moment of my career. But of course they did. Candace was the golden child. If Candace wanted a spa day, the world stopped. If Maya was ringing the bell at the NYSE, it was an inconvenience. Maya, Isaiah whispered, gripping my shoulder firmly. Look at me. You built this. You, not them. You are here because of your work. Do not let them steal this from you. Ring that bell. I looked at the empty chairs one last time. I thought about the garage. I thought about the way my father used to tell me that computer science was a man's job, and I should learn to cook like Candace. I thought about the way my mother would sigh whenever I talked about my algorithms, asking why I could not just marry a rich banker like Candace's husband Hunter. The countdown began on the massive screens. 10, 9, 8. I forced a smile onto my face. It was a mask. A shield. I straightened my spine. I was Maya Johnson, CEO of $100 million company. I was not the disappointed daughter anymore. 5, 4, 3. I reached for the gavel. The wood felt heavy and cool. The crowd was chanting. The cameras were zooming in. I channeled every ounce of anger, every drop of rejection, and turned it into power. 2, 1. I brought the gavel down on the sounding block. The bell rang out loud and clear, echoing through the cavernous hall. Confetti rained down from the ceiling. The floor erupted in cheers. People were clapping, shouting my name. Isaiah kissed my cheek, whispering how proud he was. For a split second, I felt triumphant. I had done it. But as the applause died down and we were ushered off the balcony for the CNBC interview, reality crashed back in. I walked past the empty VIP section. I saw a production assistant removing the reserved for family signs from the chairs. My phone buzzed in my hand. Once, twice, then a continuous stream of vibrations. The news was out. The headline was flashing across every financial news ticker in the country. DermaScan IPO soars. Founder Maya Johnson, net worth estimated at $102 million. I looked down at the screen. A text message from Dad. I expected an apology, maybe a lie about a flat tire, maybe, just maybe, a congratulations. I opened the message. Reginald Johnson. Congrats on the news. We saw the article. Call me back immediately. We need to talk before you do anything with that money. Family dinner at 7 p.m. at our house. Hunter and Candace are coming back early. Do not be late. Important discussion. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. No. Sorry we missed it. We saw the article. They did not care about the achievement. They cared about the valuation. They saw the number 102 million, and suddenly the spa wasn't important anymore. Suddenly, I was family again. I looked at Isaiah. He had seen the text over my shoulder. His jaw tightened. Do not go, he said quietly. Maya, they are predators. I looked at the picture of Candace in her robe again. I looked at the text from my father demanding my presence. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. It replaced the sadness. It replaced the longing for approval. I am going. I told Isaiah, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Why, he asked. Because I said, walking toward the news cameras with a genuine smile this time, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. They think they are inviting their daughter to dinner. They don't realize they just invited the CEO who owns their debt. Get the car ready, Isaiah. I want to see their faces when I serve the main course. The chaos of the trading floor had followed me back to the DermaScan headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. Champagne corks were popping in the open-plan office area, where my team of 40 engineers and data scientists were celebrating the victory they had helped build. Confetti littered the floor, and someone had already printed a banner that read DRMA 102 million. I smiled and raised a glass with them, thanking them for the late nights and the missed weekends. But inside my glass-walled office, the silence was deafening. I sat in my ergonomic chair and stared at the tablet on my desk. The Forbes article had gone live 10 minutes ago. The headline was bold and impossible to ignore. It read, "Self-made and soaring. How 34-year-old Maya Johnson revolutionized dermatology with AI and built a nine-figure empire." There was my face looking confident and poised, a stark contrast to the trembling girl who had just been rejected by her own parents hours earlier. The number $102 million was highlighted in green. That number was a blessing, but as I was about to find out, it was also a beacon for every leech in my bloodline. My personal phone, which had been relatively quiet for years, suddenly began to convulse on the mahogany desk. It buzzed and vibrated with a ferocity that made me nauseous. I glanced at the screen. A call from Aunt Sarah. This was the same Aunt Sarah who had told me at a family barbecue 5 years ago that I was wasting my pretty years staring at computer screens and that I should focus on finding a husband before I dried up. She had not called me on my birthday. She had not called when I got engaged. But now she was calling twice in a row. Then came a text from cousin Marcus, who I had not seen since he borrowed $200 from me in college and vanished. The text read, "Hey, cuz, so proud of you. We should grab drinks and catch up. It has been too long." I turned the phone face down. The hypocrisy was suffocating. They did not want to catch up. They wanted to catch a check. The door to my office opened and Isaiah walked in. He had loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar, looking exhausted but relieved. He closed the door behind him, muffling the sounds of the party outside. He did not look happy. He held his phone out to me. "You need to see this," he said, his voice tight. "Your dad just texted me too. He probably thought you were ignoring him." I took Isaiah's phone. The message from Reginald Johnson was longer than the one he had sent me. It read, "Isaiah, make sure Maya comes home tonight. Tell her it is not just a dinner, it is a family strategy meeting. Hunter and Candace canceled the rest of their spa weekend and are driving back right now. We need to discuss how to protect this new capital. Do not let her make any rash decisions with outsiders. See you at 7. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Protect the capital. That was rich coming from a man who had drained his own retirement fund to buy a boat he used twice a year. And the phrase outsiders was a clear jab at my team, my lawyers, and probably Isaiah himself. "They canceled the spa," I said, handing the phone back. The moment they saw the Forbes article, the cucumber water and massages suddenly lost their appeal. They realized the real cash cow was not in the Hamptons but right here in Manhattan. Isaiah sat on the edge of my desk, crossing his arms. "You know what this is, Maya. They are going to pitch you something. Or ask for something. Probably both. You do not have to go. We can order takeout, go home to our apartment and turn off our phones. Let them sit at that table alone." I swiveled my chair to look out the window at the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the buildings. I thought about simply going home. It would be the healthy thing to do. It would be the peaceful choice. But peace was not what I wanted tonight. I wanted closure. And more than that, I wanted to see the look in their eyes when they realized the Bank of Maya was permanently closed. "I am going," I said, my voice steady. "But I am not going alone. And I am not going unprepared." I picked up my office phone and dialed a number I had memorized. It rang once before a crisp, professional voice answered. "David, it is Maya. Congratulations on the IPO, Maya," my personal attorney said. "I assume the press is overwhelming." "It is," I said. "But that is not why I am calling. I need you to print the file we discussed last month. The one labeled Asset Protection and Liability. Specifically, the documents regarding the property on Oak Street." There was a pause on the line. "Are you sure, Maya? That is the nuclear option? Once you execute that, there is no going back." I looked at the text from my father again. "Important discussion. Family strategy." "I am sure," I said. "Courier it to my parents' address. Have it arrive by 7:30. I want it to be a surprise." I hung up and looked at Isaiah. He was smiling a slow, knowing smile. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. "I will get the car," he said. The drive to the suburbs of Chicago usually took 40 minutes, but tonight it felt like a journey back in time. As the city lights faded and were replaced by manicured lawns and white picket fences, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. This was the neighborhood where I grew up, the neighborhood where I was constantly compared to Candace. We pulled up to the house at exactly 6:55. It was a beautiful two-story colonial with fresh white siding and a wraparound porch. A brand new Mercedes SUV was parked in the driveway with a vanity plate that read Candace. That was the car my parents had bought her as a graduation gift when she finished her fashion merchandising degree, a degree she had never used. I stared at the house. To the neighbors, it was the residence of Reginald and Elaine Johnson. To my family, it was their ancestral pride. But to me, it was a ledger of lies. 5 years ago, Dad had made a bad investment in a friend's restaurant. He had lost nearly everything and was on the brink of foreclosure. He had called me in the middle of the night, weeping, begging me not to let them lose the family home. I had just started making real money with Dermascan, so I stepped in. I paid off the arrears. I refinanced the mortgage in my name to get a better rate. For the last 60 months, the mortgage payments had been automatically deducted from my account. But there was a catch. Dad was too proud to let anyone know his daughter saved him. So he told everyone, including Candace and Hunter, that the house was fully paid off, thanks to his savvy investing. He told them Candace helped with the maintenance costs, which was a lie. Candace had never paid a bill in her life. I watched the front curtain twitch. My mother was peeking out, waiting for us. "Are you ready?" Isaiah asked, turning off the engine. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. I applied a fresh coat of red lipstick. It was like war paint. I reached into my bag and touched the cold hard drive that contained the evidence of Hunter's financial history, something I had dug up when I first suspected he was a fraud. Between the lawyer coming with the deed to the house and the information I had on Hunter, this dinner was going to be memorable. "I am ready," I said. I stepped out of the car. The evening air was cool. I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. I was walking into the lion's den, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the prey. I was the hunter. I reached for the brass doorknob, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The smell of fried chicken and greed hit me instantly. The aroma of buttermilk fried chicken and collard greens hit me the moment the mahogany door swung open. It was a scent that usually signaled Sunday comfort memories of better times before I became the family outcast. But tonight the smell felt heavy, cloying like a trap baited with nostalgia. My mother Elaine stood in the doorway wearing her best silk blouse and a smile so wide it looked painful. Before I could even say hello, she lunged forward, wrapping me in an embrace that squeezed the air from my lungs. "Maya, baby. Look at you, my superstar," she shrieked, her voice pitching up an octave higher than normal. She smelled of expensive lavender perfume, a scent I knew she only wore for church and bank loan interviews. She rocked me back and forth, a display of maternal affection she had not shown since I was 6 years old. For a second, I stiffened, my arms glued to my sides. This was the same woman who had told me just last Christmas that I was working myself into an early grave for a pipe dream. Now she was hugging me as if she had birthed the $100 million herself. "I missed you, baby girl," she whispered, pulling back to cup my face with manicured hands. I gently removed her hands. "You missed the bell ringing this morning too, Mom." She didn't even blink. "Oh, hush now. That is just ceremonial. Tonight is what matters. The family is together. Come in, come in." I stepped into the foyer, Isaiah close behind me, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. The house was spotless. The good china was out. Fresh flowers were on the console table. It was a stage set and the actors were already in position. Candace was lounging on the velvet sofa, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and for a moment her eyes narrowed with genuine jealousy before the influencer mask slid into place. She jumped up, her brand new orange Hermes Birkin bag swinging conspicuously from her arm. "OMG, Maya," she squealed, rushing over to air kiss my cheek. I saw the article. You look fierce, but honestly, that blazer? You need a stylist now. You represent the family brand. She posed, making sure the Birkin was front and center. Do you like it? Hunter got it for me as a pre-celebration gift. I mean, since you are loaded now, maybe you can get me the matching one in crocodile skin. We could be twinsies. Imagine the engagement on my feed. I looked at the bag. It was worth more than the car I drove for the first 3 years of my startup. That is a nice bag, Candace, I said flatly. I hope you kept the receipt. Before she could respond, Hunter emerged from the dining room. He was wearing a navy suit that fit a little too tightly across the chest, the kind of aggressive tailoring meant to signal power. He walked with the swagger of a man who owned the place, even though I knew his credit score was probably lower than the temperature outside. There she is, the woman of the hour, Hunter boomed. He bypassed Isaiah completely and extended a hand to me. His grip was firm, bordering on crushing. A dominance play. I let go of his hand quickly. Hello, Hunter. He leaned against the doorframe, swirling a glass of scotch. I read the Forbes piece. Impressive numbers, Maya. Really. But between you and me, they undervalued you. He took a sip, his eyes scanning me with a patronizing glint. These analysts, they don't understand the scalability of AI in niche markets. If I had been advising you during the roadshow, we could have opened at 150. Easily. You left money on the table, sweetheart. My jaw tightened. Hunter, whose last job was managing a crypto portfolio that went to zero, was explaining my valuation to me. I think the market spoke quite clearly, Hunter, I replied, keeping my voice cool. He chuckled, a dismissive sound. The market is emotional, Maya. You need a steady hand at the wheel now. But we will get to that. Let's eat. I am starving. We moved into the dining room. The table was groaning under the weight of the food. Macaroni and cheese with the burnt edges, just how I liked it. Candied yams. Cornbread. It was a feast fit for royalty or a condemned prisoner. My father Reginald sat at the head of the table. He stood up as I entered, buttoning his jacket. He looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, but his posture was still rigid with that old-school patriarchal pride. He did not hug me. He simply nodded, gesturing to the seat to his right. Sit, Maya. Isaiah, you can sit there next to Hunter. We sat. The tension in the room was thicker than the gravy. Mom bustled around serving plates, piling high mounds of food onto my porcelain dish. Eat, eat, she urged. You look thin. They don't feed you right in that city. I took a bite of the mac and cheese. It was delicious, which made me angry. It tasted like home, and I hated that they could still reach me through these simple sensory triggers. So Dad began wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about the technology I had built. He looked around the table, expanding his chest. I have been thinking all day about this success, and I realized this is the result of the Johnson work ethic. I nearly choked on my cornbread. Isaiah reached for his water glass, hiding a smirk. Dad continued, his voice taking on a sermon-like quality. I know I was hard on you growing up, Maya. I pushed you. I was strict. I didn't let you run wild. I told you that the world would not hand you anything because of the color of your skin. And today proves I was right. My discipline made you strong. I put my fork down. The metal clinked loudly against the china. You told me coding was for boys, Dad. You told me to go to nursing school because it was safe. You refused to co-sign my first business loan. Dad waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. That was reverse psychology. I needed you to have grit. If I had made it easy, you would have ended up soft. Look at you now. A CEO. That didn't happen by accident. That is my legacy flowing through your veins. Candace chimed in, her mouth full of yams. Totally. We all sacrificed for this. I mean, I stayed out of your way so you could study. I was the social one so you could be the nerd. We are like a team. Hunter nodded solemnly. Exactly. A team. And now that you have reached the summit, Maya, the game changes. Wealth creation is one thing. Wealth preservation. That is a man's game. I looked at Isaiah. He was staring at his plate, his knuckles white as he gripped his fork. He wanted to speak to defend me, to tell them they were delusional, but he respected my wish to handle this. "What are you trying to say, Hunter?" I asked, locking eyes with my brother-in-law. Hunter smiled, the kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. He reached under the table and pulled out a thick leather portfolio. He placed it on the table, pushing aside the bowl of collard greens. Dad cleared his throat. He looked at the portfolio, then at me. His expression shifted from proud father to serious businessman. "Maya, listen. Having $100 million puts a target on your back. You are a young woman. You are emotional. You have a husband who is, well, an artist." "Isaiah is an architect," I corrected sharply. "Same difference," Dad said. "He is not a finance man. We cannot risk this money leaving the family bloodline. We cannot risk you making a mistake because you are overwhelmed." Hunter opened the portfolio. The papers inside were crisp, heavy legal stock. Dad continued, "Hunter and I have been discussing this for weeks. We have come up with a solution to protect you. To protect us." Hunter slid the document across the tablecloth. It stopped right in front of my plate. The bold header at the top read, "The Johnson Family Revocable Trust." "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "It is a shield," Hunter said, his voice dripping with false concern. "It consolidates your assets, your shares in Dermascan, your liquid cash, everything. It puts it into a trust managed by the family board." "And who is on this board?" I asked, flipping the page. Dad sat up straighter. "I will be the chairman, of course. Hunter will be the chief investment officer, given his background on Wall Street. You and Candace will be beneficiaries. You will get a generous monthly allowance, Maya. Enough to live like a queen without the headache of managing the capital." I looked up. They were serious. They actually believed that after I spent 5 years building a company from scratch, I would hand over the keys to a failed restaurant owner and a disgraced hedge fund manager. Dad pointed a calloused finger at the signature line. "We are doing this because we love you, Maya. We don't want to see you lose it all. Sign it. Tonight. Let's make this official so we can really celebrate." I looked at the pen Hunter was holding out to me. It was a Mont Blanc. Expensive. Probably bought with money he didn't have. I reached out and took the pen. The room went silent. Candace stopped chewing. Mom leaned forward, her eyes wide with anticipation. They thought they had won. They thought the little girl who sought their approval was still sitting in this chair. But she wasn't. I held the pen, feeling its weight. Then I looked at my father and smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. "You want to protect the family assets?" I asked softly. "Yes," Dad breathed out. "I am glad you said that," I replied, "because I have some documents of my own." I dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell onto the floor with a soft clatter. Then I reached into my purse. The leather portfolio hit the table with a heavy thud that rattled the silverware. It was a calculated move designed to assert dominance and signal that playtime was over. Hunter did not just place the documents down. He presented them like the 10 Commandments. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, allowing his stomach to press against the white linen tablecloth, and clasped his hands together on top of the leather binder. He looked at me with the pitying expression a teacher might give a slow student. "Maya, let us be real for a moment." Hunter began, his voice dropping to a confidential baritone. "I have seen the S1 filing. I have looked at your cap table. You have built a nice little app here. Really kudos. But running a tech startup and managing generational wealth are two very different beasts. You are in the Shark Tank now, and frankly, you are bleeding into the water." He opened the binder. Inside were pages and pages of dense legal text, flagged with yellow sticky notes where I was supposed to sign. "I have been running some simulations." Hunter continued, pointing a manicured finger at a chart that looked like it had been made in Excel 95. "You are facing significant tax exposure, capital gains, estate taxes, potential litigation risks. If you keep these assets in your personal name, the IRS will eat you alive. You could lose 40% overnight just to Uncle Sam." He paused for dramatic effect, looking at my father to make sure his audience was captivated. Dad nodded gravely, his brow furrowed. He did not understand a word Hunter was saying, but he understood the fear of losing money. "My proposal is simple," Hunter said, sliding the first page toward me. "We create the Johnson Family Revocable Trust. We transfer 40% of your founder shares into this vehicle immediately. It shields the assets. It creates a firewall between you and the inevitable lawsuits that target public CEOs." I looked at the document. It was not a standard asset protection trust. It was a power grab. "And the governance structure?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. Hunter smiled, revealing teeth that had been whitened a few shades too bright. "That is the beauty of it. To make it legally bulletproof, it needs independent oversight. Reginald here will serve as the chairman of the board, ensuring the family values are upheld. I will step in as the chief investment officer to handle the daily allocation and strategy. You and Candace will be the primary beneficiaries." "I see," I said. "So I generate the wealth, Dad controls it, and you play with it." "It is not playing." Maya Hunter snapped his mask, slipping for a fraction of a second. "It is high-level asset management. Look, let's be honest. You are a coder, you are an engineer, you are brilliant at algorithms, I am sure. But finance, the markets, that is a man's game. It requires a certain temperament. Women in tech, well, the statistics show they burn out. They get emotional. They make bad calls when the pressure hits. We are trying to take that burden off your shoulders so you can focus on your little dermatology project." My little dermatology project was worth more than his entire bloodline, but I stayed silent. I wanted them to dig the hole deeper. Candace, sensing an opening to attack, leaned forward. She swirled her wine glass, looking from me to Isaiah. "Hunter is right, Maya," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "I mean, look who you are taking advice from." She pointed a long acrylic fingernail at Isaiah. "No offense, Isaiah, but you draw houses for a living. You are an architect. Hunter worked on Wall Street. He managed millions while you were picking out tile samples. If I were you, Maya, I would trust the expert in the family, not the guy who thinks a hammer is a financial tool." Isaiah started to rise from his chair. The veins in his neck were bulging. He had tolerated the snide remarks about his career for years, but being told he was less of a man because he didn't work in finance was the breaking point. "Sit down, Isaiah," I said softly, placing my hand on his forearm. He looked at me, his eyes blazing. "Maya, you cannot let them talk to us like this." I squeezed his arm hard. I said, "Sit down. I have this." Isaiah slowly sank back into his chair, but his gaze remained fixed on Hunter like a laser. I turned my full attention to Hunter. I picked up the document and flipped to the fee structure page. I scanned it quickly, my eyes widened. "Hunter," I said, keeping my tone conversational, "you mentioned you want to shield me from tax exposure. Can you explain why this trust is structured as a grantor-retained annuity trust? Or a GRAT, given the current interest rate environment?" Hunter blinked. He shifted in his seat. "Well, the GRAT it is a standard vehicle for minimizing the estate tax impact. Actually, I interrupted, with interest rates this high, a GRAT is incredibly inefficient. The hurdle rate is too high to transfer any significant appreciation. But that is not what concerns me." I pointed to a paragraph on page 5. It says here the chief investment officer takes a 2% management fee annually, plus 20% of any appreciation. That is a hedge fund fee structure, Hunter. For a family trust, Hunter began to sweat. Beads of perspiration formed on his upper lip. "Well, that is industry standard for top-tier talent, Maya. You pay for quality." "Top-tier talent?" I asked. I looked at him with cold curiosity. "Okay, let's talk about your talent. What was the Sharpe ratio of the last fund you managed at Goldman?" The room went silent. Dad looked back and forth between us, sensing the shift in power but not understanding the vocabulary. The sharp ratio, Hunter stammered. He tugged at his collar. Look, historical data is irrelevant. I am talking about forward-looking alpha. I did not let him up for air. It is a simple question, Hunter. The Sharpe ratio measures risk-adjusted return. If you are going to manage $40 million of my money, I need to know you understand risk. So, was it above 1? Was it negative? Because looking at this fee structure, you seem to value your services very highly. Hunter's face turned a mottled shade of red. You are getting bogged down in technicalities. This is about family, this is about trust. I slammed the portfolio shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. No, Hunter, this is about theft. You are trying to lock my shares into a trust where I have no voting rights. Charge me exorbitant fees to manage money. You have no idea how to invest, and put my father as a figurehead so you can drain the liquidity. You do not know what a Sharpe ratio is, because you were never a portfolio manager. You were a junior analyst who got fired for compliance violations. Hunter stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. How dare you, Reginald? Are you going to let her speak to me like this? Dad's face was purple with rage. He did not understand the math, but he understood that his authority was being challenged. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the wine glasses jump. Enough! Dad roared. His voice shook the room. He pointed a shaking finger at me. I do not care about your ratios or your fancy words. You think you are so smart because you made some money? You are nothing without this family. He grabbed the pen. Hunter had dropped earlier and shoved it toward me. You are treating your brother-in-law like a criminal, Dad shouted. He is trying to help you. You sign those papers right now. Maya, I stared at him calmly. Give me one good reason why I should sign over 40% of my company to you, Dad. Because I said so. Dad screamed, spittle flying from his lips. Because that garage you sat in for 3 years. That was my garage, my electricity, my roof. You built that company on my property under my protection. By rights, that company belongs to me, just as much as it belongs to you. I am your father, and I demand you pay your dues. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Candace looked gleeful. Hunter looked relieved that the heat was off him. Mom just looked down at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at my father. I looked at the man who claimed ownership of my success because he had allowed me to exist in a drafty, unheated garage that I paid for. I slowly stood up. I picked up my purse. I reached inside, past my phone, past my wallet, and my fingers closed around the folded pieces of paper I had brought with me. You want to talk about the garage, Dad? I asked quietly. Fine. Let's talk about the garage. I pulled out the receipts. You want to talk about the garage? I repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air like smoke. A low, humorless chuckle escaped my throat. It was the sound of a woman who had finally realized that the pedestal she had placed her parents on was actually a cage. Dad looked confused by my laughter. He expected tears. He expected submission. He expected the obedient daughter who had spent her life trying to earn a crumb of his affection. Instead, he got the CEO. I reached into my bag and pulled out a plastic Ziploc bag containing a stack of small yellowed pieces of paper. They were old, crinkled, and smelled faintly of motor oil and damp cardboard. I tossed the bag onto the center of the table. It landed on top of Hunter's leather portfolio with a defiant slap. Open it, I said, my voice razor sharp. Dad stared at the bag. What is this? It is the ledger of your so-called support, I replied. Go ahead. Read the top one. Dad hesitated, his hand trembling slightly as he picked up the first slip of paper. He squinted at his own handwriting. August 1st, 2018. I recited from memory. Rent for garage space, $1,000, plus $200 for electricity surcharge, paid in cash. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. You charged me $1,200 a month to work in a concrete box with no insulation. When the pipes froze that first winter and I had to code in a parka and fingerless gloves. Did you offer me a space heater? No. You charged me an extra $50 a month to plug in my own heater because you said I was running up your bill. Gasps went around the table. Mom put a hand to her mouth. Candace looked at Dad, blinking rapidly. You charged her rent? Candace asked, her voice small. You told us you gave her that space for free to help her get on her feet. You told everyone at church you were her angel investor. Dad's face flushed a deep, embarrassed crimson. He slammed the receipt down. It was a business arrangement. I was teaching her the value of $1. Real estate isn't free, Maya. Exactly, I said, standing up. It was a business arrangement, a transaction. I paid you $36,000 over 3 years for a space that was legally uninhabitable. That means we are square, Dad. I don't owe you a percentage of my company. I don't owe you my intellectual property. And I certainly don't owe you my dignity. I turned my gaze to Hunter. He was trying to shrink into his chair, looking everywhere except at me. He reached for his water glass, his hand shaking so badly that ice cubes clinked against the crystal. And you, I said, shifting my target. The financial genius. The man who wants to protect my assets. Hunter cleared his throat, forcing a weak smile. Maya, let's not get emotional. We can structure the trust differently if the fees are a sticking point. The fees are not the point, Hunter, I interrupted. The fraud is the point. The room went deathly silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. I pulled a single crisp sheet of paper from my bag. It was a background check report, specifically the compliance record from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. I know why you left Goldman Sachs 3 years ago, I said, my voice calm and steady. You didn't leave to start your own boutique firm as you told everyone. You were terminated for cause, unauthorized trading in client accounts. You tried to cover up a 6-figure loss by moving money between accounts without authorization. You were barred from the industry for 5 years. I slid the paper across the table. It stopped right in front of Dad's plate. Dad looked down. He saw the official seal. He saw the word expelled in bold red letters next to Hunter's name. Hunter leaped to his feet, his face draining of all color. That is a lie. That is a fabrication. She forged that. Reginald, don't listen to her. She is jealous of our success. Dad looked at Hunter, then at the paper, then at me. His brain was trying to process the collapse of his narrative. His golden son-in-law was a fraud. His scapegoat daughter was the only one telling the truth. But instead of thanking me, instead of apologizing, Dad did what narcissists always do when cornered. He attacked the person holding the mirror. He stood up, knocking his chair backward. It crashed onto the floor. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Get out!" he screamed, his voice cracking. I stood my ground. "You want me to leave because I exposed him? I want you out of my house!" Dad roared, pointing a shaking finger at the door. "You come in here flashing your money, disrespecting your mother, attacking your sister's husband. You are poison, Maya. You are an ungrateful, arrogant little brat." He grabbed the trust document and ripped it in half, throwing the pieces at me. "I don't want your money. I don't want your shares. You are dead to me, do you hear? Dead. Let's see how long your precious stock price lasts when the world finds out you abandoned your family. Get out!" Isaiah stepped forward, placing himself between me and my father. "We are leaving, Reginald, and do not ever speak to my wife like that again." Dad laughed a manic, desperate sound. Take her and get out. She is a curse." I looked at my mother. She was weeping silently into her napkin, but she didn't say a word. She didn't look up. She chose her side. She chose the lie because the truth was too painful to bear. I grabbed my purse. "Goodbye, Dad," I said softly. "Keep the receipts. You might need them for the IRS audit. I am fairly certain Hunter is about to bring down on you." I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't look back at the dining room. I didn't look back at the untouched soul food. I walked through the foyer, past the family photos that I was notably absent from, and out into the cool night air. The heavy front door slammed shut behind us, the sound echoing like a final gavel strike. I marched down the driveway to our car, my heart pounding against my ribs. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cord. "Are you okay?" Isaiah asked, opening the car door for me. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine and exhaust. "I am better than okay, Isaiah. I am free." I slid into the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt. I felt lighter. The burden of their expectations, the weight of their judgment, it was gone. I had paid my dues. I had the receipts. Isaiah started the car and we began to back out of the driveway. I pulled out my phone to check my email planning to message my lawyer to finalize the purchase of their mortgage debt. But as the screen lit up, a notification banner dropped down from the top. It was from Instagram. "Candace is live. My heart is broken. Please pray for my family." My stomach dropped. I tapped the notification. The video loaded instantly. Candace was sitting in her old bedroom, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. The lighting was dim, designed to elicit sympathy. "Hey guys," she sobbed into the camera, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "I didn't want to do this. I really didn't. But I am just so scared. My sister, Maya, the one who just got famous. She just came to our house and attacked my dad." I watched in horror as the viewer count ticked up. 5,000. 10,000. She screamed at him. Candace continued, her voice trembling. "She threw things. She made fun of us for being poor. She said she was going to ruin us because we aren't rich like her. My dad is having chest pains right now. We are waiting for the ambulance. I just don't understand how money can change people like this." The comments were flying by faster than I could read them. "Cancel Maya Johnson. Boycott Derma Scan. What a monster. Rich people are evil." I stared at the screen, the blue light illuminating the car. They were not just disowning me, they were destroying me. "Isaiah." I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Drive. Drive fast." The war hadn't ended at the dinner table. It had just moved to a battlefield where the truth didn't matter, only the performance did. And Candace was winning an Oscar. The morning sun that filtered into my penthouse apartment felt more like an interrogation light than a new beginning. I had barely slept, the adrenaline from the night before curdling into a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, hoping that perhaps the silence from my family meant they were retreating, licking their wounds in shame. I could not have been more wrong. The first notification was from my PR crisis manager, Sarah. It was a single word: disaster. Below it was a link to a video that was already trending #1 on Twitter and YouTube. The title made my blood run cold. "The Truth About Maya Johnson: How America's Newest Tech Darling Abuses Her Elderly Parents." I clicked the link. The video opened with a somber piano track. Candace appeared on screen, her eyes red and puffy, clutching a tissue. She was not wearing her usual designer clothes. Instead, she wore a simple, oversized gray sweatshirt, looking small and vulnerable. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Hi, everyone," she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. "I have debated posting this all night. I am shaking as I record this. But I cannot stay silent anymore. You all see the headlines about my sister Maya. You see the millions. You see the success. But you do not see what happens behind closed doors." The video cut to a grainy, shaky clip. It was from last night, but it had been heavily edited. It showed me standing up at the dinner table, my face contorted in anger as I shouted, "I don't owe you anything." Then it cut to my father, looking frail and confused, asking, "Why are you doing this to us?" It cut out the part where they demanded 40% of my company. It cut out the part where they admitted to charging me rent for a garage. It cut out the part where Hunter insulted my husband. It was just 10 seconds of me looking like a monster, followed by 5 minutes of Candace crying about how I had abandoned them, how I had physically shoved my mother a complete lie, and how I had mocked their financial struggles. My sister has changed. Candace sobbed into the camera. She came to our house last night, threw food at us, and told my dad he was pathetic for being poor. She said she owns us now. I am so scared for my parents. They are old. They don't deserve this. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. The video had 2.5 million views. It had been up for 6 hours. I scrolled down to the comments. They were a cesspool of hatred. Boycott Dermascan. This woman is evil. Take away her money and give it to her parents. Cancel Maya Johnson. My phone rang. It was Sarah again. Maya, tell me you have seen it, she said, her voice tight with panic. I saw it, I rasped. It is a lie, Sarah. Every word of it. It doesn't matter if it is a lie, Sarah snapped. It is viral. The hashtag boycott Dermascan is trending in 10 countries. Pre-market trading shows the stock is down 5%. The board is freaking out. I have 3 major investors on hold right now demanding an explanation. You need to issue a statement, an apology. I sat up in bed, fury replacing the shock. I am not apologizing for something I didn't do. Maya, listen to me. This isn't about truth. It is about optics. You look like a rich, ungrateful brat who hates her family. That is poison for a brand built on care and inclusivity. I hung up on her. I walked into the living room. Isaiah was already awake, watching the large TV on the wall. He had the volume turned down low, but I recognized the face on the screen immediately. It was my father. He was sitting on a morning talk show couch, looking small and defeated. Hunter was sitting next to him, his hand placed supportively on Dad's shoulder. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Exclusive." Heartbroken father speaks out. I turned up the volume. I just wanted her to be happy, Dad was saying, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. I sacrificed everything for her education. I mortgaged my home to help her start that business. And now that she has made it, she won't even return my calls. She treats us like dirt. Last night broke my heart. The host, a woman known for her sympathetic interviews, leaned in. And is it true she threatened legal action against you? Dad nodded slowly. She brought out lawyers. She threatened to evict us, her own parents. I threw the remote control across the room. It smashed against the wall, the batteries skittering across the hardwood floor. They are lying, I screamed. They are lying on national television. Isaiah stood up and walked over to me, wrapping his arms around my trembling frame. I know, baby. I know. It is a smear campaign. Hunter is orchestrating this. Look at him. I looked at the screen. Hunter was nodding solemnly, looking the picture of a concerned son-in-law. We are just worried about her mental state, Hunter said smoothly. The money has changed her. We are exploring legal options, not for the money but to get her the help she needs. We believe she is not fit to run that company right now. That was the kill shot. They weren't just trying to ruin my reputation. They were trying to declare me incompetent. They were trying to stage a coup. My phone buzzed again. An email notification popped up on my watch. The sender was a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line was purely formal. Service of process. Johnson versus Johnson. I opened the email on my phone. It was a lawsuit. Plaintiff, Reginald Johnson. Defendant, Maya Johnson. Cause of action, breach of verbal contract. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Theft of intellectual property. I scrolled to the bottom. The demand for damages was staggering. $30 million. They were claiming that the idea for the skin cancer detection algorithm was developed during family brainstorming sessions. They were claiming that my father was a co-founder who had been cut out. They were claiming that my refusal to sign the trust was a breach of their verbal agreement to share the profits. It was absurd. It was baseless. Any judge would throw it out in a heartbeat once they saw the evidence. But that wasn't the point. Hunter knew he couldn't win in court. He didn't want to go to court. He wanted to drag this out in the public eye. He wanted to bleed me dry with legal fees and bad press until I cut them a check just to make it stop. $30 million, I whispered. They want $30 million to go away. Isaiah looked at the email over my shoulder. He let out a low whistle. This is extortion, Maya, plain and simple. I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. Paparazzi were already gathering outside my building. I could see their long lenses pointed up at my balcony. I was trapped. If I fight this, the stock tanks, I said, my mind racing. If I pay them, I admit guilt, and they will come back for more in 6 months. There is a third option, Isaiah said. I turned to look at him. What? Burn it down, he said, his voice hard. You have the files on Hunter. You have the evidence of his fraud. You have the receipts from the garage. Release them. All of them. I shook my head. If I release the Hunter files, the SEC gets involved. My parents lose their house immediately because it was bought with dirty money. They go to jail as accomplices or end up on the street. Isaiah walked over to me and held my face in his hands. Maya, look at the TV. Look at what they are doing to you. They are already on the street. They just don't know it yet because they are living in Hunter's house of cards. You cannot save people who are actively trying to destroy you. I looked back at the screen. Dad was now sobbing into his hands while the host patted his back. It was a performance. A cruel, calculated performance designed to steal the one thing I had built for myself. My dignity. I took a deep breath. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical precision. Get the car, Isaiah, I said. We aren't going to the office. Where are we going? He asked. I picked up my phone and dialed my private investigator. We are going to find the one person Hunter forgot to silence, I said. We are going to find his ex-wife. The polished oak conference table in my attorney's office felt miles long, distancing me from the absurd document sitting in the center. David, my lead counsel, adjusted his glasses and looked at me with a mixture of professional fatigue and personal sympathy. He tapped the paper with his pen. You have to hear the specific language, Maya, he said. It claims that during a Thanksgiving dinner in 2019, Reginald Johnson provided the foundational concept for the algorithmic neural network used in DermaScan. It alleges that you, as his daughter, acted merely as the technician executing his visionary directive. Therefore, he is claiming 50% co-founder status and seeking $30 million in backdated royalties and punitive damages. I stared at David, waiting for the punchline. My father thought the cloud was literal water vapor in the sky. He still typed with one finger. He called every video game Nintendo. The idea that he had conceptualized a machine learning model for dermatological diagnosis was not just a lie, it was science fiction. He cannot be serious, I said, my voice flat. Dad thinks Python is a snake at the zoo. If we put him on the stand and ask him to define an algorithm, he would perjure himself in 10 seconds. David nodded. We know that. And more importantly, Hunter knows that. This lawsuit is not designed to win in a courtroom, Maya. It is designed to bleed you in the boardroom. He stood up and walked to the whiteboard. Look at the timing. Your stock is already wobbly from the smear campaign. Now they file a lawsuit challenging the ownership of the core intellectual property. That scares institutional investors. They do not like uncertainty. Hunter is betting that the board will panic and force you to settle. He wants you to write a check for 5 or 10 million just to make the headache go away, so the stock price stabilizes. It is a shakedown, a legal mugging. I looked out the window at the gray Manhattan skyline. It was brilliant in a sick, twisted way. Hunter knew he was a fraud. He knew my father was delusional. But he also knew that Wall Street hated drama more than it hated lies. He was weaponizing the market against me. So if I fight it, I lose value, I said. And if I pay them, I admit that their lies have merit. David sat back down. Precisely. It is a game of chicken. The question is, who blinks first? While I was sitting in a high-rise debating legal strategy, a very different conversation was happening 30 miles away in the kitchen where I grew up. My private investigator had planted a listening device in the flower pot on the porch days ago, and I listened to the recording later that evening. It was a masterclass in manipulation. The audio was crisp. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the scratching of a pen on paper. Reginald. This is the only way. Hunter's voice was smooth, urgent. We have them on the ropes. The lawsuit has already made the news. Her stock is down another 3% today. She is terrified. I heard my mother's voice shaky and uncertain. But Hunter mortgaging the house. This is our home. We finally own it, free and clear. What if we lose the case? What if Maya fights back? Hunter sighed, the sound of a patient man dealing with simpletons. Elaine, we are not going to lose. But litigation is expensive. My lawyers need retainers. We need to hire expert witnesses to testify that Reginald's ideas were the basis of her code. This money from the house is not spending, it is an investment. When we win, and we will win, Maya will have to pay legal fees plus the $30 million. You will get this money back 10 times over. Think of it as a bridge loan to your future. There was a silence. I could imagine my father sitting there, his ego bruised by our confrontation, desperate to regain the upper hand. She humiliated me, Reginald muttered. His voice was low and bitter. She came into my house, threw money in my face, and treated me like I was her employee. She thinks she is better than us because she got lucky with a computer program. She did not get lucky. Reginald. Hunter fed the fire. She stole from you. She stood on your shoulders and then kicked you in the face. Are you going to let her win? Are you going to let her keep everything while you scrape by on Social Security? No, Dad snapped. No. I am the head of this family. Then sign the papers, Hunter urged. Use the equity in this house to fund the war. Show her that you are not afraid. Show her that the Johnson name belongs to you, not her. But what about the payments? Mom asked weakly. If we take out $300,000, the monthly note will be high. We are on a fixed income. I will cover the payments, Hunter lied effortlessly. My investments are about to mature next month. I will handle the mortgage until the settlement check clears. You won't pay a dime. Trust me. I am doing this for us. For the family. I listened to the scratching sound of a ballpoint pen moving across paper. It was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. My father, driven by pride and blinded by a con man, was signing away the only asset he had left, the house that I had secretly paid off for him. He was leveraging my gift to fund a war against me. The recording ended with the sound of papers being shuffled. Perfect, Hunter said. I will run this to the bank first thing in the morning. We will have the war chest by noon. I took off my headphones, feeling physically ill. Hunter was not just suing me. He was cannibalizing my parents. He knew that lawsuit was garbage. He knew there would be no settlement. He was simply extracting the last drop of equity from them before the ship went down. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was the private investigator, Marcus. Maya, you need to see the file I just sent over. Marcus said, his voice grim. I opened my secure email client. A PDF titled Project Ponzi popped up. I knew Hunter was bad, Marcus said, but I didn't know he was this active. I dug into the shell companies he is using to pay for that lifestyle. The cars, the clothes, the gala he is planning. None of it is real money. What is it? I asked, clicking open the file. It is a classic Ponzi scheme disguised as a crypto arbitrage fund, Marcus explained. He has been taking money from new investors to pay out fake returns to older ones. But the well is running dry. He is desperate for liquidity. That is why he is pushing for the lawsuit settlement. He needs a big injection of cash to keep the scheme floating for another few months. I stared at the flowcharts Marcus had created. The money from my parents' mortgage was not going to lawyers. He is not going to use the house money for the lawsuit, is he? I asked, feeling a cold pit in my stomach. No, Marcus replied. He is going to dump that $300,000 straight into the Ponzi to pay off a couple of angry investors who are threatening to go to the FBI. Your parents are not investors, Maya. They are the exit liquidity. Once he gets that check from the bank, that money is gone. And when the scheme collapses, the bank will foreclose on the house. I leaned back in my chair. My parents had just signed their death warrant. They had handed their home to a wolf who promised to guard the sheep. I looked at the time. It was late. The bank would open in 9 hours. I could call them. I could try to warn them. But after the smear campaign, after the lawsuit, after my father called me a thief on national television, would they even listen? Or would they think I was trying to sabotage their victory? I realized then that Isaiah was right. You cannot save people who are holding the match to their own gasoline. But you can make sure that when the explosion happens, the right person gets burned. Marcus, I said, my voice hardening. Let the transaction go through. Are you sure? Marcus asked. They will lose the house. I know, I said. But if we stop it now, they will just blame me for holding them back. They need to see the theft with their own eyes. Let Hunter cash that check. Let him think he has won. And while he is busy spending their money, I want you to find the one person who knows exactly where all the bodies are buried. Who is that? His ex-wife, I said. Find her. Pay her whatever she wants. I need her at that gala next week. I hung up the phone. The lawsuit was a distraction. The real war was about to begin, and I was done playing defense. Hunter wanted a settlement. I was going to give him a reckoning. The safe house Marcus used for his high-level investigations was a stark contrast to the chaotic noise of the internet. Here, in a windowless room illuminated only by the blue glow of server racks and multiple monitors, there were no hashtags, no sobbing live streams, and no emotional manipulation. There was only data. And data, unlike my family, never lied. Marcus sat at the main terminal, his fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard. He was a digital forensic specialist I had hired years ago to audit my company's security, and he was the only person I trusted to dissect the rotting carcass of Hunter's financial life. Isaiah stood behind him, arms crossed, his face grim. I pulled a chair up to the desk, watching the lines of code resolve into bank statements and wire transfers. "We are inside," Marcus said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I have bypassed the proxy servers he set up. We are looking at the raw ledger of the Sterling Capital Fund." "Show me," I said. Marcus hit a key, and a visualization appeared on the center screen. It looked like a spider web with hundreds of thin red lines radiating out from a central hub. "This is a classic Ponzi structure," Marcus explained, pointing to the center. "This is Hunter's operating account. These lines coming in are deposits from new investors. These lines going out are payments to early investors. There is no trading activity, no stock purchases, no crypto assets. He is just taking money from Peter to pay Paul." I scanned the list of names. Some I recognized: wealthy doctors from the country club, a few retired teachers from our church. Hunter had not just scammed strangers, he had hunted in our own backyard. But look at the cash flow, Marcus said, zooming in on the timeline. The inflow stopped 3 months ago. The well is dry. He has been defaulting on payments. That is why he is desperate. He needs fresh blood to keep the illusion alive. "And that is where my parents come in," I whispered. Marcus nodded slowly. He opened a new window. It showed a transaction time-stamped just 6 hours ago. The amount was $320,000. The source was First National Bank, a wire transfer from a home equity line of credit. The beneficiary was Sterling Capital. "There it is," Isaiah said, his voice thick with disgust. "The mortgage money." I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. My father had signed those papers yesterday, believing he was funding a legal war to protect his legacy. He believed he was paying top-tier lawyers to fight for his rights. "Where did it go?" I asked, pointing at the screen. "Did he pay a retainer to the law firm suing me?" Marcus shook his head. "Watch this." He tracked the money. It hit the Sterling Capital account at 9 in the morning. At 9:15 it was split into 3 chunks. One chunk went to pay the lease on Hunter's Porsche. Another chunk went to a luxury event planner for the upcoming gala. And the biggest chunk, $200,000, was wired immediately to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. "He is not fighting a lawsuit," Maya Marcus said. "He is cashing out." He is skimming the last bit of cream before the milk goes sour. He is planning to run. I stared at the screen. My parents' home, the safety net I had secretly built for them, was gone. It was sitting in a numbered account in the Caribbean, waiting for Hunter to join it. And what about Candace, I asked. Does she know Marcus pulled up another file? This one was a credit report. Candace is just as much a victim as she is an accomplice, Marcus said. Look at her personal cards. Amex Black, Visa Signature, all of them are maxed out. She has been trying to use them for the last week, but the transactions are being declined. He clicked on a log of text messages intercepted from Candace's phone. I read the messages she sent to Hunter. Babe, my card got declined at Sephora again. The cashier looked at me like I was broke. Fix this. And Hunter's reply. It is just a fraud alert, baby. The bank is being overprotective because we are spending so much. Use the debit card. I transferred cash. He is gaslighting her too, I realized. She thinks they are rich. She thinks the declined cards are just technical glitches. She has no idea she is drowning in debt. I stood up and paced the small room. The air conditioning was humming, but I felt hot, suffocated by the magnitude of the betrayal. My parents were not just broke. They were destitute. The moment the bank realized the equity was gone and the payments stopped, they would foreclose. My father, a man defined by his pride, would be homeless at 65. I have to tell them, I said, stopping in front of Isaiah. I have to call Mom. If I show them this, if I show them the wire transfer to the Caymans, they will stop the lawsuit. They will see that Hunter is the villain. I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact. Isaiah reached out and gently covered my hand with his. Maya, stop. I looked at him, tears stinging my eyes. Isaiah, they are going to lose everything. That is still my mother. That is still the house I grew up in. Isaiah took the phone from my hand and set it down on the desk. Think about what happened yesterday, Maya, he said, his voice firm but compassionate. Think about the live stream. Think about your father on national television calling you a thief. If you go to them now with this data, what will they say? They will say I hacked them. I replied, the realization dawning on me. Exactly, Isaiah said. Hunter has already primed them to believe you are a vindictive, powerful tech mogul out to destroy them. If you show them bank records, Hunter will say you forged them. He will say you used your AI to create fake documents. He will say you are spying on them, which technically you are. But I cannot just let them crash, I argued, though my resolve was weakening. You are not letting them crash, Isaiah said. They have already crashed. They just haven't hit the ground yet. He turned me to face him, holding my shoulders. You cannot save people who do not want to be saved, Maya. You cannot force them to see the truth when they are comfortable in the lie. If you bail them out now, if you intervene, you are just the villain who ruined their beautiful dream. They need to wake up on their own. And the only thing that wakes people like your father up is consequences. I looked back at the screen. The red lines of the Ponzi scheme pulsed like infected veins. So we wait, I asked. We wait, Marcus chimed in from the desk. But we don't wait long. I found the invitation list for the gala Hunter is hosting next week. The gala, I repeated. The one he is using my parents' mortgage money to pay for. Yes, Marcus said. He is billing it as the launch of the Johnson Family Foundation. He invited every high net worth individual in Atlanta. He is going to try to raise one last round of capital before he disappears. That is the stage, Isaiah said. That is where he feels safe. That is where he will be arrogant. I looked at the invitation Marcus pulled up on the screen. It was gold and black, elegant and expensive. It promised a night of luxury and legacy. If I expose him now in private, he runs, I said, thinking aloud. He takes the Cayman money and vanishes. My parents are left with the debt and no answers. Correct, Marcus said. But if I expose him there, I continued, my mind sharpening into a weapon. If I expose him in front of the very people he is trying to impress, in front of the investors he is trying to swindle, he panics. He freezes. and the police can be waiting at the back door. It is risky, Isaiah warned. It will be a scene. Your parents will be humiliated publicly. They humiliated me publicly yesterday, I said, my voice turning cold. They wanted a spectacle. I will give them a spectacle. I turned to Marcus. Do not touch the accounts I ordered. Let the wire transfer clear. Let Hunter feel rich. Let him buy the champagne and the caviar. Let him think he has gotten away with it. I walked over to the printer where the gala invitation was displayed. Can you get us in? I asked. Marcus smirked. I can get you a front row seat. I can also get you control of the audio-visual system. I nodded. Good. Because I am not just coming to dinner. I am coming to give a keynote speech. I looked at Isaiah. He nodded, understanding the shift. The grieving daughter was gone. The CEO was back in charge. My parents had made their choice. They had bet their home, their reputation, and their daughter on a lie. Now they were going to have to watch that lie unravel in high definition. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call my mother. Instead, I sent a text to my lawyer. Draft the purchase agreement for the distressed mortgage on the Oak Street property, and prepare a non-disclosure agreement. I have a feeling the current owners are going to need a landlord very soon. We walked out of the safe house and into the night. The city lights blurred as we drove, but my vision had never been clearer. The moral dilemma was over. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about surgery. And sometimes to cut out the cancer, you have to cut deep. The gala was in 5 days. I had 5 days to prepare the perfect funeral for Hunter's career, and I intended to wear red. The house on Oak Street was silent. Not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. It had been 5 days since my father signed away the equity in the home to fund Hunter's non-existent legal defense. For 5 days, my parents had waited for the wire transfer that Hunter promised would cover the bills. They waited for the reassurance that they were winning the war against their ungrateful daughter. Instead, they got a foreclosure notice taped to the front door and a house full of dead appliances. At 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, the electricity cut out. The hum of the refrigerator died. The air conditioning unit outside sputtered and ground to a halt. In the sweltering Atlanta heat, the house began to bake. My mother Elaine, panic rising in her chest, did what she always did when reality became too difficult to handle. She called the golden child. I know this because I had access to the call logs, but I didn't need a spy to imagine the conversation. Mom called Candace 3 times before my sister finally picked up. Mom! I am literally in a fitting right now. Candace hissed into the phone, the background noise of a busy boutique audible behind her. What is it, Candace? The lights are out? Mom cried, her voice trembling. The water is off too. The man from the utility company just left. He said the bill has not been paid in 4 months. Hunter said he was handling the utilities. He said he put everything on autopay through his company account. There was a pause on the line. Candace did not gasp. She did not offer to drive over. She sighed, the sound of someone inconvenienced by a gnat. Mom, Hunter is moving millions of dollars around right now for the lawsuit, Candace said, her tone dismissive. Sometimes when you move large assets, the small accounts get flagged or frozen temporarily. It is just a banking glitch. Do not be dramatic. It is 90 degrees in here, Candace. Mom shouted, desperation cracking her voice. All the food in the freezer is going to spoil. I need you to come pick us up. Or send us some money to go to a hotel. I cannot, Candace snapped. I am prepping for the gala. I have to get my hair done at 4. Look, just light some candles. Open a window. Hunter will fix it when he gets out of his meetings. I have to go. The line went dead. Candace, with her maxed-out credit cards and her rented luxury life, had abandoned them to the heat. She could not help them even if she wanted to, but the cruelty was that she didn't even want to try. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I was sitting in my office reviewing the final acquisition papers for the mortgage note on my parents' house. When I saw Mom's name on the screen, I hesitated. Isaiah was sitting across from me. He gave me a nod. Answer it, he said softly. Remind them of their choices. I swiped green. Hello, Mother. Maya. Oh, thank God, Mom wept. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She launched straight into the crisis. You have to help us. They cut the power. They cut the water. Your father is sitting in the dark and his blood pressure is sky high. We have no cash. Please, Maya, just transfer us $5,000, just until Hunter sorts out the bank error. I leaned back in my chair staring at the skyline. The request was breathtaking in its audacity. They were suing me for $30 million, claiming I was a thief, yet they were asking me for cash to survive the afternoon. Mom, I said, keeping my voice devoid of the anger that was boiling inside me. I am confused. On the news yesterday, Dad said I was a financial predator. He said Hunter was the brilliant mind protecting the family assets. Why aren't you calling your chief investment officer? Don't be like that, Mom sobbed. This is an emergency. We are your parents. You cannot leave us in the heat. We are elderly. You are 60, Mom, I said. You are not invalid. And you are not victims of a disaster. You are victims of your own greed. You signed the equity over to Hunter. He took $300,000 out of your house 5 days ago. Are you telling me he didn't pay the light bill? He did pay it. Mom insisted, clinging to the lie. It is a system error. He told us the bank froze the accounts because of the lawsuit expenses. It is your fault, really. If you hadn't forced us to sue you, none of this would be happening. I closed my eyes. There it was. Even in the dark, even sweating in a house they were about to lose, it was still my fault. I cannot help you, Mom, I said coldly. If I send you money, it undermines my legal position in the lawsuit you filed against me. My lawyer has advised me not to interfere with the plaintiff's financial situation. You wanted a legal battle. This is what it looks like. Call Hunter. I hung up before she could guilt me further. My hand was shaking. It went against every instinct I had to leave them suffering, but Isaiah was right. If I saved them now, they would never see the truth. They would think Hunter fixed it. They needed to sit in that dark, hot house and realize that their golden boy had left them to rot. Back on Oak Street, as the sun went down and the house turned pitch black, my father refused to leave. He sat in his armchair by the window, fanning himself with a folded newspaper. It will be back on any minute, Dad muttered to Mom, who was lighting a vanilla-scented candle on the dining table. Hunter sent me a text. He said he is on the phone with the CEO of the power company right now. He is going to get heads rolling for this mistake. But the lights did not come on. They ate peanut butter sandwiches by candlelight, the silence of the house amplified by the terrifying reality that they had no money, no power, and no one coming to save them. The next morning the power was still out. But a courier arrived. He didn't bring a check. He brought 2 garment bags and a heavy cream envelope. Mom opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a printed letter from Hunter on thick gold-embossed stationery. Dear Mom and Dad, the letter read, apologies for the utility mix-up. My team is working on it. In the meantime, we have a bigger mission, to counter Maya's smear campaign and show the world that the Johnson family is united and prosperous. I am hosting the inaugural Johnson Family Foundation Gala this Saturday at the St. Regis. I have enclosed your outfits, a tuxedo for Reginald and a gown for Elaine. Your attendance is mandatory. We need to look successful to attract the investors who will help us win the lawsuit. A car will pick you up at 6. Do not be late. Love, Hunter. Dad touched the tuxedo sleeve. It was velvet. It looked expensive. See? Dad said, his eyes lighting up with delusional hope. I told you, he is handling it. This gala is the answer. He is going to raise millions, and then we will pay off the house and the bills. We just have to look the part. Mom looked at the dark refrigerator, then at the gown. She felt sick, but she nodded. They had no other choice. They were passengers on a high-speed train that was running out of track, but looking out the window, all they chose to see was the scenery. In my office, Marcus projected the same invitation onto the wall. He is forcing them to go, Marcus said. He needs them there as props. If the parents are there smiling, the investors will think the rumors about the family feud are false. He is using them as human shields. I looked at the date on the invitation. Saturday. 3 days away. Let him have his show, I said, standing up. He wants the Johnson family united. He is going to get it. I turned to Isaiah. Did the purchase agreement for the house go through? Isaiah nodded, sliding a blue folder across the desk. As of this morning, the bank sold the note. The deed is in your holding company's name. You own the house on Oak Street. Good, I said. And the power I called the utility company as the new owner? Isaiah said. I paid the arrears. The lights should be back on in an hour. I smiled, but it was a sad, tired smile. They will think Hunter fixed it, I said. Let them think that, Isaiah replied. It will make the fall on Saturday that much harder. I walked to the window. Saturday night. The St. Regis. It was going to be the most expensive dinner of Hunter's life. And for my parents, it would be the moment the lights finally came on, not just in their house, but in their minds. I hope they liked the view. The St. Regis Hotel in Atlanta is known for its crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and the kind of hush that only money can buy. 3 days before the gala, Hunter stood in the center of the grand ballroom barking orders at a terrified event planner. He was spending money like water, demanding imported orchids from Thailand and a champagne tower that defied gravity. To the hotel staff, he looked like a high-rolling financier. To me, watching the surveillance footage Marcus had accessed from the hotel security system, he looked like a man trying to build a fortress out of playing cards. He had put down a $50,000 deposit for the venue. That money had come directly from the wire transfer my father had authorized, the very last equity drained from the home I grew up in. Hunter was not just throwing a party, he was constructing a stage for his final con. He had invited the city's elite, promising them a reveal of the Johnson Family Foundation, a vehicle he claimed would revolutionize philanthropic investing. In reality, the prospectus he had sent out promised returns of 200%, a mathematical impossibility that screamed fraud to anyone with a calculator. But Hunter knew his audience. He was targeting the greedy and the gullible people who wanted to believe in magic because the market had been too slow for them. While Hunter was burning through my parents' retirement fund, Candace was busy constructing her own facade. My private investigator tracked her to a high-end rental boutique in Buckhead. She spent 3 hours trying on gowns that retailed for $10,000, finally settling on a gold-sequined number that looked like a disco ball had exploded. She could not afford to buy it, of course. Her credit cards were dead plastic. So she rented it for the weekend, putting the deposit on Hunter's corporate card, which was currently being fueled by the stolen mortgage money. 10 minutes later, a photo appeared on her Instagram. She was posing in the dressing room, the gold dress shimmering under the lights. The caption read, "Fitting for the family gala. It takes expensive taste to build a legacy. Cannot wait to celebrate our success with the movers and shakers of Atlanta. Hashtag old money. Black excellence. CEO." I stared at the hashtag old money and almost laughed. The only thing old about their money was the debt, which had been aging like milk since the day Hunter walked into their lives. But while they were playing dress-up, I was sitting in a windowless conference room in downtown Atlanta, staring across a steel table at 2 special agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and a senior investigator from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The mood in the room was sterile and cold. There were no chandeliers here, only fluorescent lights and the hum of hard drives. I slid a heavy black hard drive across the table. "This contains everything," I said, my voice steady. "The ledger of the Ponzi scheme, the wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, the falsified investor reports, and the recording of him convincing my parents to liquidate their home equity to fund his flight risk." Agent Miller, a man with a gray buzz cut and eyes that had seen too much, picked up the drive. He looked at me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "You know what this means for your brother-in-law, Ms. Johnson," he said. "This is wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. He is looking at 20 years minimum." "I know," I replied. And your parents, the SEC investigator asked. They are listed as investors. Technically, they are victims, but if they are knowingly helping him launder money through this foundation, they don't know. I cut in quickly. They are foolish and they are greedy, but they are not criminals. They think this is legitimate. They think they are saving the family name. Agent Miller nodded. We will need to move on this. We can pick him up at his office tomorrow. No, I said. Not his office. The agents looked at me. If you arrest him quietly, he will spin it, I explained. He will tell his investors it is a misunderstanding. He will tell my parents it is a conspiracy I orchestrated. He will play the martyr. I need you to arrest him when he feels safest. I need you to arrest him when he is standing on stage lying to the world. Agent Miller leaned back, tapping his pen on the table. You want us to hit the gala? I want you to wait until I finish my speech, I said. I am going to dismantle his lie publicly. When I am done, there will be no room for spin. There will only be the truth. The agent held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. We will have a team in the back. Do not put yourself in physical danger. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. The only danger at that party will be the truth. I left the federal building and walked 2 blocks to my lawyer's office. The final piece of the puzzle was waiting for me. David met me in the lobby holding a blue folder. He looked excited. It is done, he said, handing me the folder. I opened it. Inside was the deed to 420 Oak Street, my parents' house. The bank was happy to unload the distressed note, David explained. They were preparing to foreclose next week. Your holding company Oak Street LLC is now the legal owner of the property and the debt. You are the bank, Maya. I ran my fingers over the legal description of the property. I saw my father's signature on the original mortgage, shaky and desperate. I saw the new addendum transferring rights to my company. So I can evict them? I asked, testing the weight of the power. Technically, yes, David said. You own the roof over their heads. You own the walls they are currently hanging their tuxedos in. I closed the folder. I didn't feel joy. I felt a heavy, somber sense of closure. I wasn't going to evict them, not yet. I needed them to understand that the security they thought they had lost, the home they thought Hunter had saved, was actually being held together by the daughter they had discarded. I went back to my penthouse. Isaiah was waiting with a glass of wine and a large cream-colored envelope that had arrived by courier an hour ago. It is from him, Isaiah said, his face grim. I took the envelope. It was heavy, made of expensive cardstock with gold leaf lettering. I tore it open. Inside was the invitation to the gala. Reginald and Elaine Johnson cordially invite you to the launch of the Johnson Family Foundation. And there, clipped to the invitation, was a handwritten note from Hunter. The ink was black and aggressive. Maya, I know things got heated, but this is business. Come see what real wealth creation looks like. Maybe you will learn how the big boys play the game. Consider this an olive branch. Do not embarrass us by not showing up. Hunter. I read the note twice. The audacity was breathtaking. He had stolen my parents' money, sued me for $30 million, and now he was inviting me to watch him celebrate his crimes, framed as a lesson in business. He thinks he has won, I whispered. He thinks I am scared of the lawsuit. He thinks I will come there and kiss the ring to make the bad press go away. Isaiah looked at the note. Are you going? I walked over to the fireplace and placed the invitation on the mantel. I didn't burn it. I wanted to keep it as a souvenir. Oh, I am going, I said, turning to Isaiah with a smile that felt sharp enough to cut glass. He wants me to see how the big boys play. I think it is time I showed him that he is playing checkers, and I have already cleared the board. I pulled out my phone and typed a reply to the RSVP number. I will be there. And I will be bringing a +1. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. Who is the +1? The FBI. I shook my head. No, the FBI is the cleanup crew. My +1 is the ghost he thought he buried 5 years ago. I dialed Marcus. Is she ready? I asked. She is flying in from Miami tonight, Marcus replied. She is terrified, Maya. But she hates him more than she is scared. Good, I said. Get her a dress. Make it red. We are going to make sure that when Hunter looks out into that crowd, he sees exactly what is coming for him. I hung up the phone. The stage was set. The players were in position. In 48 hours, the music would stop, and Hunter was going to find out that there were no chairs left. The St. Regis ballroom smelled of imported white lilies and old money. It was a scent designed to intoxicate, to make you forget that the economy was volatile and that the man standing on the stage was a predator. Hunter had outdone himself. There were ice sculptures, a live jazz band playing soft, non-threatening standards, and waiters circulating with trays of champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. From the back of the room, hidden in the shadows of the entrance archway, I watched my parents. They were seated at the head table right next to the podium. To the casual observer, they looked like royalty. My father Reginald was wearing the velvet tuxedo Hunter had sent him. He sat with his back straight, nodding solemnly as people walked by to shake his hand. My mother Elaine was draped in midnight blue silk, a string of pearls around her neck. But I knew better. I knew that at 8 o'clock this morning, a recovery agent from a collection agency had banged on their front door. He had not come for the house yet, but for the car. My father had to stand in his driveway in his bathrobe and beg the man for 24 more hours, claiming a wire transfer was pending. I could see that terror etched into the lines around his eyes now. Every time a waiter approached the table, my father flinched as if expecting a process server instead of a refill on his water. They were terrified, but they were sitting there playing their part in the charade because they believed this gala was the lifeboat. On stage, Hunter was in his element. He held the microphone with the ease of a televangelist, pacing back and forth, making eye contact with the wealthy doctors and business owners he had lured into the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hunter boomed, his voice rich and confident. "When I married into the Johnson family, I didn't just gain a wife. I gained a legacy of hard work, of integrity, and of vision." He gestured toward my parents. My father beamed weakly, desperate for the validation. "That is why we launched the Johnson Family Foundation," Hunter continued. "Not just to create wealth, but to steward it. To ensure that our values outlive us. And speaking of values, I want to introduce the woman who inspires me every day. My wife and the heart of this organization, Candace." Candace stood up. She shimmered in the gold sequined dress she had rented. She waved to the crowd, blowing kisses like she was accepting an Oscar. She looked radiant, completely oblivious to the fact that the credit card used to rent that dress had been declined 3 times before Hunter forced the transaction through using my parents' stolen equity. "She is a symbol of what we can achieve when we support one another," Hunter said, clapping. The room erupted in polite applause. These people didn't know they were clapping for a fraud. They saw the expensive venue, the well-dressed family, and they assumed success. It was the perfect illusion. And it was time to shatter it. I nodded to Isaiah. He squeezed my hand, adjusted his cufflinks, and pushed open the heavy double doors. We stepped into the light. I was wearing red, not a polite burgundy or a soft rose, but a deep, blood-red crimson that commanded attention. It was a dress designed for war. As we walked down the center aisle, the sound of my heels on the marble floor seemed to cut through the jazz music. Heads began to turn. At first, it was just a few people near the back. Then a ripple of whispers moved through the room like a wave. "Is that her? That is the sister. The one who sued her father. I thought she was crazy." The whispers grew louder, competing with the band. The musicians, sensing the shift in the room's energy, faltered for a beat. On stage, Hunter froze mid-sentence. He shielded his eyes against the spotlight, peering into the crowd. When he saw me, a flicker of genuine fear crossed his face, but he buried it instantly under a mask of arrogant pity. He probably thought I had come to surrender. He probably thought I had brought a settlement check. Candace was the first to react. She saw me approaching the stage and practically sprinted down the steps to intercept me. She planted herself in the middle of the aisle, hands on her hips, her gold dress catching the light aggressively. "What are you doing here?" she hissed loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. I didn't stop walking until I was inches from her face. "I am attending a family event, Candace." "Isn't that what this is?" Candace sneered. "You are not family. Not after what you did. Dad doesn't want you here. Hunter doesn't want you here. You are just here to cause a scene because you are jealous that we are moving on without you. Get out, Maya. Before I call security." I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had live-streamed lies about me to millions of people, who was currently wearing a dress paid for by the destruction of our parents' future. "I suggest you move, Candace," I said calmly. "Or what?" she challenged, crossing her arms. "You think you can just buy your way back in?" I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Actually, yes. That is exactly what I did." I sidestepped her. She tried to grab my arm, but Isaiah stepped in, blocking her gently but firmly. I continued toward the stage. My parents were staring at me with open mouths. My mother looked like she was about to faint. My father looked angry, his face flushing red above his velvet tuxedo. Hunter decided to take control of the narrative. He smiled broadly, spreading his arms wide as if welcoming a prodigal child. "Well, well," he said into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescension. "Look who decided to join us. Maya. I must say I am surprised. After everything, you still came to support the family. That takes courage, or perhaps humility." He was baiting me. He wanted me to look unstable. He wanted me to scream. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I didn't scream. I smiled back. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Hunter," I said, my voice projecting clearly, even without a mic. Hunter chuckled nervously. "Well, grab a seat in the back, Maya. We were just getting to the investment opportunities." I put a foot on the first step. "Actually, I prefer the front," I said. Hunter's smile faltered. "Maya, this is a private presentation for investors and sponsors only." I took another step up. The room was deathly silent now. Every eye was glued to the confrontation. I know I said ascending the stairs until I was standing on the stage eye to eye with him. He was shorter than I remembered. Or maybe I was just standing taller. I turned to the crowd. I scanned the room, making eye contact with the wealthy faces looking back at me. Then I looked at my parents. "I am not here as a guest," I announced, my voice ringing out clearly. "I am here as the platinum sponsor." A murmur went through the crowd. Hunter looked confused. "What are you talking about?" he whispered away from the mic. "There is no platinum sponsor." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a receipt. It was for the shell company I had used to purchase the top-tier sponsorship package online just hours before the event. A package that included a 10-minute keynote address. "Check the donor list, Hunter," I said. "Atlas Holdings, LLC. That is me. And according to your own prospectus, the platinum sponsor gets to address the room." Hunter looked at the receipt, then at me. Panic flared in his eyes. He realized he had been outmaneuvered in his own game. He tried to laugh it off, turning back to the audience. "Oh, Maya, always the jokester. We are running a tight schedule tonight, folks." Maybe later. I didn't wait. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He gripped it for a second, a silent struggle for dominance, but he couldn't wrestle me for it without looking like a maniac in front of his potential victims. He let go. The feedback whine pierced the air for a split second before I steadied it. Hunter took a step toward me, his hand reaching out to guide me away. "Maya, don't do this. We can talk in the back. I will give you whatever you want. Just don't ruin this." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. "I am not here to ruin it." "Hunter," I said into the microphone, my voice booming through the speakers, "I am here to clarify it." I turned to the audience. My father started to stand up, shouting something unintelligible, but it was too late. I had the floor. "Good evening, everyone," I began. "My name is Maya Johnson. You might know me as the woman who supposedly abandoned her family. But tonight I want to tell you a different story. A story about where your money is actually going." Hunter lunged for the sound technician at the side of the stage, signaling him to cut the feed. But the technician didn't move. I had paid him triple his salary an hour ago to ensure this microphone stayed live no matter what. I looked straight into the camera that was recording the event for the Foundation's website. "Let's look at the numbers, shall we?" I said. And then I signaled Marcus in the projection booth. The giant LED screen behind me flickered. The golden logo of the Johnson Family Foundation, which had been shining proudly just seconds ago, dissolved into static. The room went quiet, the kind of heavy, confused silence that precedes a disaster. Hunter took a step toward me, his hand reaching for the microphone, but he stopped when the static cleared. The image that replaced the logo was not a slide deck. It was a live feed of a bank statement, specifically the operating account of Sterling Capital. The font was small, but on a 20-foot screen the numbers were large enough to read from the back of the room. I looked out at the sea of tuxedos and gowns. I saw confusion turning into recognition. "Let us look at where your money went," I said, my voice calm and amplified. "This is the ledger for the last 90 days. You were told your capital was being invested in high-yield bonds and emerging tech startups." I pointed to the first highlighted line item. Date, October 4th. Amount, $50,000. Recipient Portia of Atlanta. Memo lease down payment. I turned to a table near the front. "Dr. Evans, I believe you wired $50,000 to Hunter that same morning. You thought you were buying into an index fund. You actually bought the car parked out front." A gasp rippled through the room. "Doctor." Evans stood up, his face turning pale. I clicked the remote. The screen scrolled down. Date, October 12th. Amount, $25,000. Recipient, the Diamond Vault. Memo, custom jewelry. I looked down at Candace. She was still standing in the aisle, frozen. The gold necklace she was wearing seemed to grow heavy around her neck. She reached up and touched it, her eyes darting around the room. And my personal favorite, I continued scrolling to a cluster of transactions. November 1st through November 5th. Total amount $140,000. Recipient DraftKings and various offshore betting platforms. Hunter was shaking his head violently. "This is fake," he shouted, though his voice was thin without the microphone. "She hacked the system. She is manipulating the data. This is corporate espionage." I ignored him. I pressed the button again. The screen changed. This time it wasn't numbers. It was a series of text message screenshots. The bubbles were green, indicating they came from an Android phone, Hunter's personal burner phone, the one he thought was encrypted. "For those of you wondering about the family values this foundation is built on, let us hear from the founder himself," I said. The text on the screen was brutal. It was a conversation between Hunter and his mistress dated just 3 days ago. Hunter's text read, "I just need to get through this gala. Once I get the new round of funding from these idiots, we are gone. First class to the Caymans." The reply read, "What about your in-laws? What about the house?" Hunter's reply was blown up in bold letters. "Forget them. Reginald is a stupid old fool who will sign anything if you flatter his ego. And Elaine is pathetic. I drained their retirement, took their house, and they are still thanking me for it. They are useful idiots, nothing more." I heard a sound from the main table. It was a strangled choking noise. I looked over. My father, Reginald, was staring at the screen. His mouth was open. The color had drained from his face so completely that he looked like a wax figure. He looked at Hunter, then back at the screen, reading the words "stupid old fool" over and over again. My mother had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Hunter turned to them, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Reginald, Elaine, listen to me. That is not real. She typed that. She is trying to divide us. You know I love you. You know I respect you." But the seed was planted. The audience was murmuring loudly now. People were standing up. Phones were out recording everything. The illusion of the happy, wealthy family had shattered into a million sharp pieces. I am not done, I said. I clicked the remote one last time. The text messages vanished. In their place appeared a document with a red border and the official seal of Interpol. It was a red notice. A jagged, ugly mugshot stared back at the audience. The face was younger, the hair was different, but the eyes were unmistakable. It was Hunter. But the name under the photo did not say Hunter Sterling. Meet Simon Bates, I announced. Wanted in the United Kingdom for wire fraud, identity theft, and running a Ponzi scheme that defrauded pensioners out of £4 million 5 years ago. He fled the country right before the indictment. He changed his name. He moved to Atlanta. And he found a new family to prey on. I looked at Hunter. The arrogance was gone. In its place was the feral look of a trapped animal. He looked at the exits. He looked at the crowd. There was nowhere to go. The room erupted into chaos. A woman at table 4 screamed. A man threw his champagne glass onto the floor. "That is him!" someone shouted. "That is the man who stole my mother's savings in London." Candace finally found her voice. She rushed the stage, her heels clacking frantically on the stairs. She grabbed Hunter's arm, shaking him. "Tell them," she screamed, her voice shrill and hysterical. "Tell them it is a lie. Tell them she used AI to make that photo." She turned to the crowd, tears streaming down her face, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You are sick. You are jealous. You use deepfake technology to frame him because you cannot stand that we are happy. My husband is a businessman. He is a genius." She looked at Hunter, begging him to validate her reality. "Hunter, say something. Tell them who you are." Hunter shoved her away. It wasn't a gentle push. He shoved her hard enough that she stumbled and fell onto the stage floor in a heap of gold sequins. "Shut up, you idiot!" Hunter hissed at her, his voice audible to the front row. Candace gasped, looking up at him from the floor. The realization hit her harder than the shove. The mask had fallen. The loving husband, the financial wizard, the partner in crime, he was gone. Standing there was Simon Bates, a con man, who viewed her as nothing more than collateral damage. I stood over them, holding the microphone like a judge's gavel. "It is over, Hunter," I said quietly. "The investors know. The bank knows. And now my parents know." Hunter looked at me with pure hatred. "You think you have won," he spat. "You think this proves anything. I will sue you for defamation. I will bury you in litigation for the next 10 years. You have no proof that photo is me." I smiled. It was the smile of someone who had checked the board and knew checkmate was one move away. "I don't need to prove it," I said. "They do." As if on cue, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. The sound was not the polite opening of late arrivals. It was the forceful, synchronized entry of authority. Blue and red lights from the police cruisers outside flashed against the ballroom windows, cutting through the crystal chandeliers. "Federal agents," a voice boomed. "Nobody move." A team of 12 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI and SEC swarmed into the room. They moved with precision, flanking the aisles, securing the exits. Agent Miller walked down the center aisle, his badge raised high. He didn't look at the screaming guests. He didn't look at my parents who were clinging to each other in terror. He looked straight at the stage. "Simon Bates, also known as Hunter Sterling," Agent Miller shouted. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and international money laundering. Put your hands in the air and step away from the women." Hunter looked at the back door behind the stage. He took a step toward it, thinking about running. "Don't do it," I said, my voice low. "Unless you want to add resisting arrest to your resume." Hunter stopped. His shoulders slumped. The air went out of him. He raised his hands slowly, the expensive watch on his wrist catching the light one last time. Candace was still on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My parents sat frozen at their table, watching the handcuffs click around the wrists of the man they had trusted with their lives. I lowered the microphone. The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't confused. It was final. The gala was over. The Johnson Family Foundation was dead. And the truth, cold and hard as a diamond, was the only thing left standing on the stage. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is distinct. It is a sharp, metallic click that cuts through any other noise in a room. I had heard it in movies, but hearing it live, amplified by the acoustics of the St. Regis Ballroom, was a symphony. Hunter Sterling, the man who had lectured me on wealth preservation and sneered at my husband's career, was now bent over the podium, his face pressed against the wood. The arrogance that had defined him for years evaporated instantly. In its place was a pathetic, sniveling cowardice that was almost embarrassing to watch. As Agent Miller recited his rights, Hunter began to sob. It wasn't a stoic, silent weeping. It was a loud, gasping hyperventilation. He twisted his head, desperate to make eye contact with anyone who could save him. When he saw that the room was filled with disgusted stares, he turned on the only person left within striking distance. "It was her idea," Hunter screamed, jerking his head toward Candace. The agents paused, tightening their grip on his arms. Hunter continued, his voice rising in pitch. "She forced me to do it. She wanted the lifestyle. She threatened to leave me if I didn't buy her the jewelry and the cars. I was just trying to make her happy. She knew where the money came from. She is the beneficiary. Look at her neck. That necklace is evidence. She is the mastermind." I watched Candace. She was still on the floor where he had shoved her, her gold-sequined dress pooled around her like a broken disco ball. Her mouth fell open. The betrayal was absolute. Her husband, her partner, her golden ticket was not just a criminal. He was a rat. Me, Candace shrieked, scrambling to her feet. "You told me you were a genius. You told me you inherited money. I didn't know anything." Two female agents moved toward Candace. One of them took her arm firmly. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for questioning," the agent said. "You are listed as a primary beneficiary on the accounts used to launder the stolen funds, and that jewelry is seized property." "No," Candace yelled, pulling away. "I am the victim here. He lied to me too." She looked around the room, her eyes wild with panic. She saw the socialites she had tried so hard to impress recording her meltdown on their phones. She saw the St. Regis staff whispering. The walls of her delusion were crumbling, and she reverted to the only survival tactic she knew. "Daddy," she wailed, her voice cracking into a childlike plea. "Daddy, tell them who we are. Make them stop. Daddy, help me." All eyes turned to the head table. My father Reginald was standing, but he wasn't the strong patriarch who had commanded me to sign over my company just days ago. He looked small. He looked shrunken inside his velvet tuxedo. He stared at Hunter, the white son-in-law he had placed on a pedestal, the man he had trusted more than his own flesh and blood. He watched as Hunter wept and blamed Candace. Then he looked at me. I was standing on the stage, calm, untouched, and vindicated. I was the daughter he had called a failure. I was the daughter he had tried to rob. And I was the only person in the room who wasn't being dragged away in cuffs. The realization seemed to hit him physically. It wasn't just shame. It was a complete systemic shock. The narrative he had built his entire life around, that men were superior, that appearances mattered more than substance, that Candace was the prize, and I was the burden, had just been proven wrong in the most violent way possible. His chest heaved. He reached out a hand, grasping for the edge of the table. His face turned a terrifying shade of gray. "Reginald," my mother whispered, reaching for him. Dad didn't answer. He clutched his left arm. His knees buckled. He collapsed into the chair, knocking it backward, and slid to the floor with a heavy thud. Dad, Candace screamed, fighting against the agents holding her. Panic erupted in the room again. My mother fell to her knees beside him, screaming for help. I stood on the stage. My instinct, the old instinct of the daughter who wanted to please, was to rush to him. I wanted to run down the stairs, hold his hand, and tell him it would be okay. I wanted to fix it. But I didn't move. I looked at Isaiah. He was already on the phone with 911. He nodded to me, signaling that help was coming. I walked calmly to the edge of the stage. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I watched the scene unfold with the clinical detachment of a CEO managing a crisis that was no longer her liability. "Is there a doctor in the house?" a waiter shouted. Dr. Evans, the man Hunter had defrauded out of $50,000, rushed forward from the front row. He knelt beside my father, checking his pulse and loosening his tie. "He is having a cardiac event," Dr. Evans announced. "Give him space. Back up." I watched my mother weeping over him, useless and hysterical. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Maya, come here. Please, it is your father." I stayed where I was. I knew that if I went down there, if I knelt in the wreckage of their lives, I would be sucked back into the toxic cycle. They would blame me for the heart attack. They would expect me to pay the hospital bills. They would use his illness to manipulate me into silence. I gripped the microphone stand. I had saved them from the fraud. That was my job. Saving them from the physical consequences of their own stress was not. The paramedics arrived within minutes, bursting through the doors the FBI had just secured. They swarmed around my father, hooking him up to monitors. I saw his eyes flutter open. He looked confused, disoriented. The FBI agents began to escort Hunter and Candace out the side exit. Hunter was still crying, his head hung low. Candace was sobbing, looking back at Dad, but the agents didn't stop. They marched her out, her gold dress trailing on the floor, leaving a trail of sequins like breadcrumbs of her shattered vanity. The paramedics loaded Dad onto a stretcher. Mom scrambled to follow them, clutching her purse. "We are taking him to Piedmont Hospital," the paramedic said. As they wheeled him past the stage, the procession slowed for a brief second. My father turned his head. He locked eyes with me. He was wearing an oxygen mask, his skin clammy and pale. He looked fragile, a shell of the tyrant he had been at the dinner table. I thought he might apologize. I thought in this moment of near-death clarity he might say he was sorry for stealing from me, for insulting me, for choosing a con man over his daughter. He pulled the mask down slightly. His voice was a raspy whisper, barely audible over the commotion. "Maya," he wheezed. I looked down at him, my expression unreadable. "The house," he gasped, his eyes filled with terrified desperation. "The house. Did we lose the house?" I stared at him. Even with electrodes on his chest, even with his son-in-law in handcuffs, and his golden child in custody, his first thought wasn't about my feelings. It wasn't about the family bond. It was about the asset. He was terrified of being homeless. He was terrified of the poverty he had mocked me for years ago. I felt the last tiny thread of guilt snap inside my chest. It withered and died, leaving me completely free. I didn't answer him immediately. I let the question hang in the air, suspended between the stage and the stretcher. The paramedic adjusted the mask back over his face. "Sir, you need to rest." I stepped closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at him one last time. "Go to the hospital, Reginald," I said, using his first name. "Focus on your health. We can discuss your living arrangements when you are discharged." I didn't say Dad. I didn't say home. I said living arrangements. He closed his eyes, a tear leaking out as the reality of his position settled in. He was no longer the owner. He was a tenant, and he had just realized his landlord was the woman he had tried to destroy. The doors swung shut behind the stretcher. The sirens wailed, fading into the Atlanta night. I stood alone on the stage. The ballroom was emptying out. The guests were filing out in stunned silence, whispering to each other, avoiding eye contact with me. They were afraid. They had seen the power of truth, and it terrified them. Isaiah walked up the stairs and stood beside me. He didn't say a word. He just wrapped his arm around my waist and held me. "Is it over?" he asked softly. I looked at the empty spot on the floor where my sister had fallen. I looked at the overturned chair where my father had collapsed. I took a deep breath. The air tasted different. It didn't smell like lilies anymore. It tasted like oxygen. "Yes," I said, "the show is over. Let's go home." But I knew the real work was just beginning. My father had asked about the house, and tomorrow I was going to give him an answer that would redefine the power dynamics of this family forever. The sterile smell of antiseptic and floor wax in the hospital hallway was a stark reminder that even the most dramatic chapters of our lives often end in quiet clinical rooms. It had been 7 days since the gala. 7 days since Hunter was led away in handcuffs. 7 days since my father's heart, or perhaps his pride, had finally given out under the weight of the truth. I stood outside room 304, clutching a thick manila folder against my chest. Inside that folder was not just paperwork, it was the final verdict on a lifetime of conditional love. Isaiah stood beside me, his presence a steady anchor in the storm. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, adjusting the collar of his jacket. "Once you do this, the dynamic changes forever. There is no going back to being their daughter." I looked through the small glass window in the door. My father was sitting up in bed, looking frail and gray, staring blankly at the television. My mother was sitting in the visitor's chair, flipping through a magazine but not actually reading it. They looked like two people waiting for a train that had already left the station. "I stopped being their daughter the moment they tried to rob me," I said softly. "Today, I am just their landlord." I pushed the door open. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. My mother looked up, her eyes lighting with a flicker of desperate hope. My father turned his head slowly. The arrogance that used to define his jawline was gone, replaced by a sagging, fearful uncertainty. Maya Mom breathed, standing up. "You came." I didn't hug her. I walked to the foot of the bed and placed the folder on the rolling tray table. "How are you feeling, Reginald?" I asked. "I am recovering," Dad said, his voice raspy. "The doctors say it was a mild infarction. Stress." He looked at the folder, then at me. His eyes were searching for reassurance. He wanted me to be the savior. He wanted me to tell him that I had fixed everything, that the nightmare with Hunter was just a bad dream, and that his life would go back to normal. "We need to talk about the house," I said, getting straight to the point. Dad winced. "Hunter. He said he paid the mortgage. He said it was handled." "Hunter lied about everything, Reginald," I said, keeping my voice even. "The moment you signed that equity line of credit, he drained the account. He didn't make a single payment. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings 5 days ago." Mom gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "No, that cannot be true. We have lived there for 30 years. "It is true," I continued. "And because Hunter also emptied your retirement accounts to fund his Ponzi scheme, you have zero liquidity. You are insolvent. As of this morning, the bank officially repossessed the property on Oak Street." My father closed his eyes. The machine monitoring his heart rate beeped a little faster. "We are homeless," he whispered. "We are on the street." The silence in the room was heavy. This was the rock bottom they had been hurtling toward for years. They had bet on the wrong child, the wrong values, and the wrong dream. And now the bill had come due. I watched them for a moment, letting the reality sink in. I needed them to feel the cold wind of consequences before I offered shelter. Then I opened the folder. "Not exactly," I said. I flipped to the last page of the document. It was a deed transfer, stamped and notarized. The bank was eager to offload a distressed asset, I explained. So I made them an offer. I bought the note. I bought the deed. Mom's face crumbled into relief. She rushed forward, reaching for my hand. "Oh, Maya. Oh, thank God I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let us down. You are a good girl. You saved us." Dad opened his eyes, tears leaking out. "Thank you, Maya. Thank you. I know I was hard on you, but family is family, right? We will pay you back, I swear. Once I get back on my feet." I pulled my hand away from my mother. "Stop," I said. The sharpness of my tone froze them. "You are misunderstanding the situation," I said. "I didn't buy the house to give it back to you. I bought it as an investment for my holding company." I turned the folder around so they could read the document on top. It wasn't a gift letter. It was a residential lease agreement. "This is a rental contract," I said. "You are welcome to stay in the house, but you will stay as my tenants. You will pay rent. It will be a fair market rate deducted automatically from your Social Security checks. Rent, Dad asked, confused. But it is our house. It is my house, I corrected him, legally and financially. And there are conditions. I pointed to Clause 4. Candace does not live there. Mom's eyes widened. What? But she has nowhere to go. Her assets are frozen. Hunter left her with nothing. Candace is 28 years old, I said. She has a degree she never uses. She is able-bodied. She can get a job. She can rent an apartment. But she will not live under my roof on my dime. Enabling her is what got us here in the first place. She needs to learn to survive on her own. But she is your sister, Mom cried. And I am her landlord, I replied. If she moves in, you are in breach of contract and I will evict you. Is that clear? Dad looked at the paper. His hands were shaking. He looked at the clause that stripped him of his ownership, his status, and his power. And one more thing, I added. Clause 5. No interference. You do not come to my office. You do not speak to the press about me. You do not offer me business advice. You live your life, I live mine. We are family by blood, but financially we are strangers. Dad looked up at me. The anger was gone. The pride was gone. All that was left was the realization that the power dynamic had shifted permanently. He was no longer the patriarch. He was a dependent. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he hovered over the signature line. He looked at the room, at the hospital bed, at the bleak future that awaited him outside if he refused. He signed, Reginald Johnson. He dropped the pen. It rolled across the plastic table. Thank you, he whispered. But it sounded more like a surrender than gratitude. I closed the folder. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt light. The burden of seeking their approval, the weight of trying to be good enough, it had all evaporated. I didn't need them to be proud of me. I just needed them to be handled. I walked to the door. Isaiah opened it for me. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Reginald, I said. I will have the property manager send you the keys. I walked out of the hospital room and down the long, bright corridor. I didn't look back. I walked out through the automatic doors into the warm Atlanta afternoon. The sun was shining. The air smelled of pine and asphalt. I took Isaiah's hand. He squeezed it tight. It is done, he said. I looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant, endless blue. They wanted me to be the obedient daughter in their tragedy. I said, my voice steady and strong. They wanted me to play the role of the victim or the savior or the scapegoat. But I rewrote the script. I looked at Isaiah, and for the first time in years, my smile reached my eyes. Freedom is expensive, Isaiah. It cost me a family. It cost me a childhood. But standing here owning my life, owning my truth, I paused, taking a deep breath of the free air. It was worth every single penny. I walked toward the car, my heels clicking on the pavement, not as a daughter, not as a victim, but as the architect of my own fate. And the view from here was magnificent. This journey taught me that freedom isn't just about escaping toxic people. It's about reclaiming your power. My family used guilt and obligation as weapons, but I learned that setting boundaries isn't an act of betrayal, it's an act of self-preservation. You cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction, and you certainly shouldn't set yourself on fire to keep them warm. True family is built on mutual respect, not biological debt. If you've ever had to choose between your dignity and your family's approval, hit like and subscribe. Your story matters, and you are stronger than you think.